I would like to say, first off, from the last show when we were in Fort Worth, when we were taping there, and I started the program last time, and I said, "Is anyone here from Texas?" Well, I didn't want the people who didn't know to think that in some way I was going to resort to that kind of cheap attempt, to get applause and get the show going. So I just wanted you to understand, because we didn't announce that we were actually in Fort Worth. So at any rate, now we're back at home base here in North Dakota. Is anyone here from Fargo? Is anyone? If we might care to further use the map we were doing, considering the three possible ways that modes of thinking that you could look at it for our temporary purposes as the mental activities that go on ordinarily, you can easily and quite validly see are either worry-based or complaint-oriented, or some third possibility, some that was not touched by those two. You could look at it as just plain thought. If you would consider a bit further, could I rename it? This possibility of being able to think in a way that is non-polarized, a way that is impersonal, and etc. Some other new intelligence, some new way of thinking. Could you consider it as being sort of like, get ready for the quotes, thinking in real time? To be able to think, to be able to live, to be able to think about living, all simultaneously. To be able to, by what I refer to as thinking in real time, I'm not trying to literally extract its current use in the city, but to look at thinking in real time as being some intellectual activity that would be a kind of immediate grasping of what's going on, a very kind of instantaneous understanding of how things are binarily arranged, whatever it is you're thinking about, and to be able to hold on to some sort of understanding of how this is all interconnected in the background. And all of this would be, I was just a comma there, and all of this would be as opposed to ordinary thought, which, whether it be complaint or worry based, of ordinary thought that is in some way always entangled with verbal tenseness. But wait a minute. Maybe I'm stretched the word. Tenseness, I do not mean this under some sort of psychological pressure. Tenseness in the sense of time tense, in the sense of relating to the apparent divisions of time into tenses. Because, now note, if you'll go back and consider right quick that in a quiet, functional way that you can look at what passes for ordinary thought of all kinds, that it's impossible, to offer you the challenge, to find just the ordinary processes running on in your mind that in some way could not be, not to prove I'm right, but just to try and see in a different way, that everything that you ordinarily would just think about with giving it no particular attention is in some way a form of complaint, or it's a form of worry, fear, concern. All right. If you'll buy that, if you'll use that as a peephole, then you can see this. It is impossible to engage in worry-based thought, complaint-oriented thought, without, albeit perhaps tacit, but without it being in a time context. Let's take the old ordinary idea of time being a triaxial, or just a good old sequential line running, and back here somewhere is everyone's past. And up here somewhere is the future. And then right here, if we drew a little line vertically through this sequential line, that right here is some sort of sensation of the present. You cannot worry, not adequately. You cannot complain, not properly, if indeed you could hold on to some continuing, if you in some way could just hold your intellectual awareness to this little line, if we drew it and called it the present, which would always in some way have to be shifting and moving, but if in some way you were just conscious right now, and that's all you thought about was right now, can you smell immediately that it would be very difficult to complain and to worry properly? Now, we're talking about the factual world. We're talking about the secondary world. We're talking about the higher end of the intellect, which seems to be singular to man in this 3D reality, because if we were going to talk about the primary world, which does not even need to be talked about, but that's not going to stop us, just to make a contradistinction, at the primary silent level, at the lower parts of the nervous system, in a man, there is no need for any sensation. There is no need to speak of time. At that level, you could say at a quite somatic, silent, biological level, there's some kind of clocks going on, cosmic clocks they normally try to call it, but just as the need for your body to eat, to sleep, and etc., and for you to come into rutting season periodically, those of you who care to rut. But it does not require a sensation of time. Now, it may be that you being an ordinary person, that it may be quite predictably that if you're operating at the ordinary level, there may seem to be time now dragged into areas that would be primary, such as the obvious. Well, I shouldn't even have to mention it. Okay. Well, the next point. All right. You could be, the subject of food could arise. Your mate or someone could say, should we go eat? And rather than, not that it's wrong, but rather than it being simply now a primary, non-intellectual, non-secondary, non-verbal affair, that is, of eating, you might now say, well, what time is it? From one view, not to be sarcastic, but from one view, give me a break. That'd be like some beautiful woman, some of your attractive, beautiful women go, hey, sailor, want to have some fun? And you go, well, I don't know. What time is it? I only rut between 3:15 p.m. But anyway, back to food. That's a more genteel subject to discuss here. From one view, you've got to realize there's a certain kind of non-basic reality involved. Not that it's going to do you any harm. But if we were trying to pare down, we got problems? No. If we tried to pare down even the human conversation, those kind of reflections of the secondary world down to more basic levels, and if someone says, you want to go eat? I was going down to that new restaurant. You want to go with me? And you go, geez, what time is it? Now, we could stop here and sound to be sarcastic, or you can do it yourself, and think, well, what the hell is that? Are you hungry or not? And you might think, wait a minute. I'm on Dr. Fauntleroy's extra dry water diet, and I'm not supposed to eat except once every 17 and a half hours, which is all right. There's nothing wrong, except you do understand that if we were, which you're not supposed to, that's not the point, but if you were to pare down the primary world, the absolute primary acts necessary to just keep body and soul alive, or at least body, of eating and of sleeping and of getting in and out of the rain, then a sense of time in the intellectual world, it has no place. Are you going to stand out and it's raining and lightning is flashing around? I'm talking about the kind out there. And everybody else is running for it, and you wonder, well, have I ever been hit by lightning in the past? No. If you got into some discussion, you understand it's a form of insanity. It has no place in the primary world. But in the secondary world, what I want you to see is it is almost inoperable without it dealing in a sense of time. It is always entangled without seeing it, and this has a purpose. I'm not bringing it up to attack the mind, as you should know. But it has an operational, useful purpose to realize that the normal flow of what's going on in your head, about taking any qualitative view of it, just what's going on, is always always tied to a sensation some way. It's involved in tenseness is where I started this to try and just make it sort of silly and to catch your attention. But it is always in the realm of it being in a tense. And the mind does not have to say so. It certainly does not have to say, well, I got major complaints. And let's see, I can only complain about the past. So let me think of all the complaints I've got with my old man, with my father, my first 3 wives, and that guy that sold me that damn Dodge back in '78. You don't do that, or you don't do that as opposed to thinking, well, let's see, what should I do today? Should I take complaints and try and deal with them in a past tense, which sometimes is efficient and perhaps enjoyable, and I'll place, let's see, that will leave worry and what's the other one? The future. That's it. I'll worry into the future. That is, I'll worry, Jesus, I've got my annual physical exam. Oh, it's only, where's the calendar? 3 weeks. I just know I'm going to die. I just know he's going to tell me that I got something horrible. You know, Gruber's syndrome. The mind does not do that, but what I'm pointing out is based upon, not psychological pillars, but based upon, is the choir here? Based upon polarized energy running 3-dimensional reality, based upon that. It comes out in such a way that the ordinary runnings of the mind being either I'll dance forward, I'll dance backwards. The ordinary operations of the mind either, well, let's see, I'll have, okay, I can have anything I want, so I'll have either chocolate or vanilla. Based upon that, the mind, the ordinary mental operations have no choice. As I challenge you to see, you could quite properly take the ordinary modes, the ordinary operations of the mind, and see them as being some form of complaint or some form of worry. You can also, I challenge you to take a quick look, also see either one of those, that is ordinary operations, is in some way working to take the tense formula of a past, a present, a future. Then the complaints are based on, are oriented either to the past or the future. That complaints and worry is somewhere in there. While the ordinary intellect is engaged with worry and complaint, it stays involved without any choice with a feel in some way. An operational feel, and it's getting now, just real by the by, it's getting down a little lower in the brainstem than the cerebral cortex, but it gives a sensation of it being tied with whatever it's thinking about then, in some way either to the past or to the future. And then when we take this, which is going on simultaneously, but then when we move my just little aside description or hint that it's really coming from lower into the brainstem in the nervous system, but simultaneously when it's up to the level that if we could jump in and take a holograph of your own thoughts and you went, yes, that's true, I never thought about it, but my mind is either worrying or complaining right now, and in some way it is tied to a feel of the past or the future. But when it gets into mind, it apparently then, we could say, and not be ill-founded to say that even at the ordinary level, then the intellect seems to always be attempting to shift the polarized balance of the energy that's running the intellect. The balance of ideas, the balance of do I want chocolate or vanilla? The choice of is what I'm thinking good and proper and true, or is it improper, fallacious, impertinent, and does it stink? It, by the very nature of the 3-dimensional world being run by polarized energy, it is, when it gets up to this point, that we could truly call it thought. That is brain activity. Let's call it what it is. It is then attempting to continually, and succeeding, but it is attempting to continually shift this balance so that one of the ideas, one of the possibilities is, as it should be, taking precedence over the other. That the importance, the feel of I'm either worried, I'm complaint, I need revenge, I need my life justified, that this is being raised, but it must be raised at the expense of the other possibility being downplayed. I was even going to ask, if we went this far, would you care to take a real side trip and consider that neurally in a subversive way, of course, that we could rename, just for a moment, that we could rename the present from a subversive way. Tell all the people who are just watching out there, and especially South Dakota, to go to the Icebox and get yourself a bottle of beer. I started to say Buffalo. That we could rename the present to something more functional. Do you have anything in mind? Oh, how about the possible? The past, the possible, and the future. Well, in that, in the 3D world, the past and the future don't seem, if I may say so, all that amiable to change. Huh? Do you think we're overstating or understating the case? Just that, all right, forget the subversive view for a minute. Let's jump back to the ordinary view. If you're just quiet, ordinary, and sane, and somebody said, all right, time seems to be cut up into past, present, future, and they say, all right, and you say, well, if you're going to change something, where would be the most efficient? Now, there might be some wild person here and there and say, well, the future, because the future is where we'll all live. That's been popular now for several decades. You just notice that nobody, ordinary person, they never take it quite far enough. Because they won't do things like say the future is where we'll all spend eternity, like they're waving like some nebulous, vague place when it's not. All you got to do is go down the street to Forest Lawn. But at any rate, that is not what the institutional, the widespread level of human intelligence would take this. That if you said, what would seem to be absolutely beyond our grasp, that any possibility of change, no question about whether man has destiny over his fate. But if we're going to say, is there any area or areas that would really seem to be almost beyond any possible change? Well, then an average person would say, well, obviously the past. We can't change the past. There it is. And if you say, well, hey, can you change the future? Now, notwithstanding those kind of philosophical things like, well, we must work on the future because we're going to live there, and it's not really cut in stone. And but if you even take that a little bit further, and you say, well, all right, come on, then how are we going to affect the future? Well, what we've got to do is, we can't change the past, but what we've got to do is work on right now, and that will change the future. The simple point being, because of the arrangement of polarized energy running an apparent three-dimensional reality, there is no way, we started off in a more casual manner, that the past and future do not seem to be all that amiable to change. They're just not hollering, hey! When you holler, who'd like to change? The past and the future don't jump up and holler, me! It's like they got, whatever they're up to, they don't need this. They don't have to worry about it. So if there is any possibility, now we're talking about the factual world. If there is any possibility, where would it be? I would suggest even at the ordinary level it wouldn't be back there and it wouldn't be up here. And so that's why I was making a little joke that we could even rename it instead of the present, as you could call it the possible. Now at ordinary levels, people might like that, and they might take it as being not all that an astounding or fresh observation, but consider it now from a non-ordinary view. That from a subversive view, what if you could turn all of your attention here, away from what would be the ordinary first two modes of possible mental activity, that is, worry-based, complaint-based, and since they both, as I already suggested to you, that they can either and or both, can only exist in what appears to be, even if it's non-stated, a time frame, and the time frames we have narrowed down, have we not, to what would seem to be the past and the present. That doesn't give you any hint of how to call the present, or to rename it the possible, could have a whole new connotation to someone attempting to think for no particular reason. For someone attempting to engage in their own private neural rebellion. That the present, whatever that might be, as opposed to, and that it might be the place that you could be neurally, that you could act neurally possible, wherein what would seem to be everything else of all forms of worry and complaint that everybody else is, remember, working on. In case you've already forgotten, I pointed out, the grand pointer outer that I am, that taking the idea of there being three possible modes of mental activity, that the mind just running by itself, just the possible describable modes can easily and correctly, or at least with some validity, be pointed out that it's either going to be worrying, complaining, or thinking, something else. And I pointed out that even those, if you present that to other people, ordinary people, they'd say, well, all right, I like that, I can live with that. And what's all this stuff about? Is this about learning how to think or pursue the third one? If I said, yes, it is, and they said, well, I've always suspected there were other things going on throughout history. Engage with that, and by God, that's what I'm up to. I'm very interested in that. No, they're not. Not just them. Your ordinary intellect is not. It would be interested in this. It would like to diminish the grasp of worry and complaint. It says it would. But insofar as saying, well, would you really like to be able, if we got these three possibilities, worry, complaint, and then some other kind of mental activity, let us assume of which you're not fully aware. And the person says, okay. All right, what do you want to do? And they say, well, I want the third one. By God, that's what I'd like to do. And you say, are you sure you don't want to just try and decrease and somebody push down the first two instead of rise up? Then they would say, if you really begin to make them think that you had some sort of pill, that you're about to do it, they would say, well, all right. Now I would. Now I want the third one. That's what I want to do, is I want to start thinking. But, I mean, now that you mentioned it, it'd make it a lot more efficient. I mean, I could get in there and think with a lot more vigor and vitality if, assuming you can do it, if you would, just kind of chill out my worry and complaint, and then I'd be able to think better. Yeah. Now that you put it that way, I'll go for that. You're damn right they'll go for it. That's all they want. That's all the way that things are arranged. Because even if you made somebody, an ordinary person, hearing a part of that, and they say, well, I hear what you're saying, and I do have that inclination, but I'll fight it. You're right. I do go around complaining and worrying, and you're right. I would almost have said, well, wait a minute, if this is some kind of magic and you got a pill, you're right. Screw thinking, whatever that is. I'll be satisfied if you in some way can get my mind to quit worrying and to quit complaining. And if it said that and said, wait a minute, now I'm getting smart enough. Did I see that? So now I'm smart enough that we can go into the other part. But where are you left? What can you tell somebody? What can they tell themselves? If you said, all right, there is something else, you want to do that? Yes. But can the ordinary mind leave it there? Can you jump up in the air and wait there until I call you? They'll say, yes, that's what I want. I see now, that's what I want. Sam's doing the same, because then they go, so what is it? See, the point was, we can't stay here. Point is, even if it apparently can be done, it can't be done. So I just wanted to clear that up at the ordinary level. As long as we're right here, how about this? You might care to note that it's almost impossible to stare and to think in real time. For those of you that saw some connection. In an earlier episode, if you recall, when Lassie first found Kyroot in the well, or whatever that was, of pointing out that it is extremely hard on the ordinary nervous system. Now, I want to warn everyone, it is it's irritating on the ordinary nervous system to try to go along with the ordinary flow of mental energies, that is, to worry or complain, and attempt to do it, to go ahead like God intended and not stare. It's very irritating. I've known ordinary people that in some way got duped into trying that, and they said that they became just extremely tired. Extremely so. So much so that they said they just couldn't continue it after 20 or 30 seconds. If I recall, one guy from, may have been Montana, claimed, some ordinary guy, that he actually kept that up for damn near 3 minutes. But he said if he ever got his hands on me, that I'd pay for that he was extremely tired and irritated. But I'll consider what I was trying to do, sort of hint at as a thinking in real time. And I could have started that off that little bit that we passed by so quickly and say that thinking in real time, you could describe, I started off to just do it in a binary way, which pleases the two halves of everyone's brains. You mean the left and the right sphere? No. The fat and the skinny part of your brain. The part that goes, and then the part that goes. For those of you who have a Roman coin, or for those of you who have a Roman coin and it passes off as your brain, all you got to do is turn it over, turn it this way. I guess all of you noticed, more than me, what a great, I guess it's still going on, but all the great fun that psychology and even medicine got drug into it, and then famous philosophers, Donahue and Oprah and everybody in the right brain and left brain, everybody thought, boy, that just explains all kinds of stuff. Has anybody I never brought it up, but anybody thought, after all we've talked about, well, they had it down, they were to a neurological, physiological, that they were actually testing. I'm not questioning that, well, this seems to be, but think about it. It's peanut butter and it's jelly. That's why I've been telling you. It's binary energy, it's polarized energy running a three-dimensional world. They can call it left brain, intuitive brain, or right brain, artistic brain, or whatever they call it, which it's fine, it's a hobby, but like this is some major breakthrough. It was a major breakthrough 7,000 years ago when the first man says, peanut butter, and his partner said, jelly. There it is. Up, down. Or Eve says, huh? And the guy goes, do I have time or not? I mean, there's your right brain, left brain. That's it. It's polarized energy. Dual possibilities that make the world possible here. But at any rate, I started to give just a binary description and kind of functional definition of thinking in real time. And to say that thinking in real time, the sense I was trying to hint and use it would be that you could think and live simultaneously. And I could have gone with that, but I just thought that I would muck it up a bit and throw in a third one. But those of you who want to back up, since it didn't seem to strike a great responsive chord, well, no wonder that's supposed to be an E flat there. But when I tried to make some comment about thinking in real time, and I made it 3, but consider that ordinarily, just going along, again, this is a functional, operational description. It's not a physiological, psychological, neurological statement of absolute fact. It is the way in which things operate, that if you try and stop yourself and to look at the mental operations running at ordinary time, ordinary speed, you would apparently either be just kind of thinking at a minimal level, just mostly acting, mostly living. You could be in the middle of eating, no one with you, and you're not dining, you're hungry, is what it's known as in certain parts of France and Belgium. Or you are engaged in, shall we say, certain activities that you and another person might do most felicitously in the nakedness. And you might be thinking a little something, but insofar as there being great thoughts, unless you're having some kind of sexual problems and doing that old thing or whatever it is, or trying to think of what all the batting scores were for the Boston Red Sox in 1940. If you're really down there and you're you're making love, and kind of throwing yourself into it, just everything's all right, then your mental activities are sort of, shall we say, at a minimal level. That you are given the choice that a human, a civilized, everyday normal human is living in 2 worlds, what we've been calling the primary and the secondary world. The world of acts and the world of facts. Then at any given time, if you could look at it in a certain way, you could see that a man is more inclined to be, if we just weighed it out, which you could do, give it some value, that right now, such as if he was engaged in sex, you would probably say that he was more, if you just average, more engaged in living, to call it primary world, as opposed to thinking. But then at other times, not either right or wrong, just appropriate to what's going on at the ordinary city level, that a man could be thinking more than he would be living. Such as, if you were indeed trying to figure out some mathematical problem that was holding you up at work, could I suggest that just normally speaking, in the midst of having sex is not the best time to try and figure out some scientific problem. So ordinarily, what I was saying was, if it get in of you started, you could look upon what I was inferring behind thinking in real time as being a binary basis to start with, that people are ordinarily either, in serious quotation marks I guess, they're either living or they're thinking. It's not all that absolutely mutually exclusive, but it's like one of them is weighted more than the other. When I sense several of you went, now let's go back to the real one, the better one. That it's really like this, that you, at the ordinary level, are normally either thinking, living, or you're thinking about living. That you are more engaged in primary acts, or you're more engaged in secondary acts, or you're more engaged in secondary acts about primary acts. Is what that you are normally. Just ordinarily, you're either more just living, or more just thinking, or more just thinking about life and your living. Not just you, I don't mean just you, but you and what's going on. If you consider you got life, the primary world, and you got thoughts, your secondary world, then you got a third one, which is what normally they don't, of course at the ordinary level, the mind does not pair it into threes, and they call that consciousness, but it is action and self-reflection and all that. But what it is you got that you can be living, you can be thinking, or, I mean, it just flows back and forth. There's no way to just chop it up and describe it. Or you're thinking about living. That is the basis of wherein man tries to defend and extol his virtues of being self-conscious. It's the third possibility. Thinking in real time, what I was inferring when we started, would be living, thinking, and thinking about living, if all that happened to happen, if all it seemed to be appropriate, but doing them all simultaneously. Or for those of you in Luxembourg, simultaneously. But ordinarily, from that view, if you took that as being a more complex view, which it is, that if you see that there are those three possibilities, as opposed to attempting to do all three at the same time, wherever is appropriate. If you're staying here doing nothing, then the amount of the world of acts, the primary world, amounts to just standing here and staying in a halfway decent position that you don't slump enough to cut off your breathing. You're just standing here. You're not actually doing much of anything. You're not hungry. You're not eating. You're not sleeping. You're just operating at a minimal level, which it might be something going on here, but there can also be this reflecting on the whole interconnectedness of it all. That is what I was trying to infer would be a kind of immediate grasping of what people want to call now, but it would be living in real time, that you're not thinking, I should wear my better clothes tonight. What are people going to think? Now, of course, I'm having to slow this down. The mind does not work this slowly. This sounds like a soap opera, which is the best. Play like I'm not talking. It's my voiceover I've already done. But to be thinking in non-real time, that is, you're either living, you can come out, and let's say you walked out and you're going to make a speech, and you walk out and a few people applaud, and you look around, and you don't even have to think, but it's the size of the room. Maybe the bright lights got you and you're here making a speech. But the size of the room, you already got an idea, and the amount of applause, even non-verbally, that not everybody in this damn room applauded. And then you start thinking about maybe how I look, I should have done my hair, I knew I should have worn different. You start. You can be living, but then you can be thinking about living. Then you start having your own worries and complaints. Oh my God, it's my zipper. I'm afraid to reach down. Maybe, did somebody laugh? Is somebody just going to think that I'm silly and I'm here? I'm just some silly twit and I'm trying to make some serious. So all this is going on, but it would take an extraordinary complex ability to be aware of it all coevally, simultaneously. And that's what I was inferring would be thinking in real time. Just forget all these metaphysical old ideas about, live in the now, in the present. I mean, that's based on something. But, where are you going to go with that if you're ordinary? Well, go join a group. And go find the Living the Now group. I'm sure there's one somewhere. But you can't, or the ordinary mind can't do it. Or else it wouldn't find it to be a problem. Because they'll sit around and worry about, well, now that you've been a member here for 6 months of the Always Think in the Present group, how do you find do you enjoy being here? And you say, well, yes, I do. Well, how's it going? Well, not too good. See, and you start worrying, you start complaining, and they say, well, now don't get too upset yet because some of us have been here, what? Hubert, how long have you been a member of the group? 40 years? Well, can you do it yet? No. Yeah, but you've not given up, have you? No. As opposed to being able, see, that would be is what I was trying to infer about a kind of immediate grasp of the moment. Not, and I don't mean it philosophically, it is understanding the connectedness of it all. That you could stand and live, you could be aware if somebody was sticking out their tongue, you could be aware of the hand gestures you were making, you'd be aware of what time it was. Things I don't even want to go into. We just go on and on and on, but you can divide it into three parts. And say that you can either be living, whatever that is, just the kind of things that would not require actual thought. You can no longer do it. I mean, it's not even important if you could, but things that just simply would not require. If you walk into a room to make a speech with strangers and a kind of nonverbal, and when I say a kind, I mean literal. I'm not trying to pass it off, but you walk in and you've got a sensation at the actual level. Is the room safe? Are people going to attack me? Is there somebody here that, you get just no worse, no better than an animal would come in. And that you kind of stake out your territory. The stage is yours, and you wonder how close to get to the crowd. So call that living, but then thinking about living. And at the ordinary level is the kind of things I said about how do I look? Did I get my zipper? Do I look all right? You do all that. But you can do all three simultaneously. That is not normal. It is not required, and it's not a psychological trick. It is just pushing the absolute limits of the physiological world vis-a your nervous system. Because as opposed to that, I could put it another way, even though ordinary thought is just what it should be and nothing's wrong, but as opposed to that, you could say that people normally think out of sync. Not, at the ordinary level, as you know, there's nothing wrong, but as opposed to having some kind of continual awareness so that what seems to be time is compressed so that you're not thinking even unconsciously, which is tacitly, that you're not thinking in time segments about I should have worn a different shirt. If there was such a thing, I hate to do this, but we're running out, is a revolutionist thinking to himself, and he thought, I should have wore a different shirt. The attitude is, well, what kind of goddamn stuff, why am I telling me this now? Now, so we're not being sarcastic because if you know how to do it to yourself, you can do it to yourself, and I'm speaking. What is somebody that can think in some new way, and you come out and the crowd does not give the right applause, and you begin to think, and you think, God, this shirt does not match my suit. I should have wore a different shirt. What does guy say except make gestures? That's like, what is he going to say? Brilliant. I wish I'd had some ancestors that had straighter noses or smaller ears. God, I'd look better. What are you going to do with that? I mean, if you're ordinary, that's fine. That is not thought. Not as me giving that possible division in it either being based on worry or complaint. That is not any kind of absolute thought. That is not thinking. That is what I was inferring by you're thinking out of sync, that there is always some division. All right, dichotomy, damn it. Division between the first two that I said that we could even call the way people live mentally. That the way that people live, as opposed to thinking in real time, is that they're either primarily thinking about how they're living, that's how I look and what I should have done, or else they're just living, sort of at a diminished level of thought. That they're not concerned that they get carried away, let's say, that you really get into it, or maybe somebody heckles you after you get going. And somebody says, that's the damnedest idea I ever heard. And you look down kind of nonverbal and realize I could whip his ass. You go, hey, who asked you here? How much you put? Give that man's money back. Get him out of here. You're still thinking the mind may be going, but you're now almost down to the level of just animal self-protection of your territory. But to do them both simultaneously is unnatural. That would be what I was trying to infer of thinking in real time, that there is an immediate grasp, not of just the moment, not just some kind of hocus pocus or metaphysical that thinking now, but it is a grasp of how this is all connected. And as opposed to that, running on normal polarized thought is thinking out of sync, that you're never absolutely thinking as to what's going on right now. It just can't be done. It's one or the other. You may fade out now. Here's what I'm going to make my brain start fading out some. Can you do this so that I can have my brain fade out at kind of the